How far can one cruel laugh go before everything breaks? What started as a joke at my husband's birthday became the end of our marriage. I thought it was harmless laughter, but to him, it was betrayal in front of everyone he loved. I didn't realize the damage until the night he kicked us all out and started building his case in silence. I'm Iris Delane, 32, and I ruined my marriage in a single laugh. It happened on my husband's birthday, the one night I thought was supposed to be about him. Instead, I made it about me, about being funny, being adored, being the cool wife who didn't take things too seriously. When my friends joked about Caleb's size, I laughed too. I told myself it was harmless, that everyone knew it was just a game. But when he stood up from the table, eyes cold and jaw tight, I realized too late that he wasn't laughing. I still remember the way he said nothing. He didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't even look angry. He just told the waiter the bill was his and asked us all to leave. My friends went quiet, but I tried to joke again, saying he couldn't take a tease. He didn't respond. He walked out first, and the silence that followed was the longest of my life. That night, I told myself he'd calm down, that he always did. But when I came home and found my things boxed near the door, I knew something had shifted. I'd embarrassed him in front of everyone, and he wasn't going to forget it. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The morning of Caleb's birthday started like any other. He woke early, made coffee, and stood by the window reading the paper while I scrolled through messages on my phone. My friends had been planning a surprise dinner for him all week, and I was proud of myself for pulling it together. He didn't like surprises, but I thought he'd secretly enjoy it once he saw how many people cared enough to come. I told him we were just going to dinner, something small, and he smiled politely like he didn't believe me. He was always like that, calm, measured, impossible to read. It annoyed me sometimes, how he never reacted. I wanted passion, something loud, even anger if it meant he still felt something. So when he said, "I hope it's quiet tonight," I laughed and told him, "Don't worry, I'll keep it civilized." He nodded, but there was a flicker in his eyes, like he already knew I wouldn't. By noon, the group chat with my friends was full of energy. Nina, my closest friend, kept sending memes about roasting the birthday boy. I told her Caleb could handle it. He was a good sport, mature, not the type to get offended. She sent laughing emojis and said, "Let's test that theory." I didn't stop her. I liked the idea of being the fun wife, the one who wasn't uptight. When Caleb came home from work, I was already dressed. I'd chosen a fitted black dress, nothing too bold, but enough to make him notice. He looked at me for a moment and said, "You look beautiful." I thanked him, but instead of returning the compliment, I asked, "Do you think your friends will actually come?" He said, "I don't have many, but I'm fine with that." That quiet answer irritated me more than it should have. At the restaurant, the private dining room glowed with warm lights and chatter. My friends had arrived early, filling the long table with balloons, drinks, and laughter. Caleb hesitated at the door, like he wanted to turn around, but I took his hand and pulled him in. Everyone shouted, "Happy birthday," and he smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. The dinner began, light-hearted. Caleb thanked everyone for coming, made polite conversation, and even laughed once or twice. I felt relieved, like everything was going perfectly. But as the drinks flowed, the teasing began. Nina brought up how serious Caleb always looked, and another friend joked that he must be too focused on other things to smile. I rolled my eyes and said, "You know him. He's all patience, not passion." They laughed. He didn't. He tried to change the subject, asking about Nina's job, but she wasn't done. "Patience is good," she said, "but I bet it's not what keeps things exciting at home." The table roared with laughter, and I, wanting to stay part of it, laughed too. Caleb looked at me then, really looked, and something in his expression made my chest tighten. Still, I shrugged it off and said, "Come on, it's just jokes." The waiter brought the cake. Everyone clapped and cheered while I stood behind Caleb, hands on his shoulders, smiling for photos. Nina whispered something about how lucky I was to have such a calm man. I replied without thinking, "Yeah, calm in every way." More laughter. That was the line that did it. Caleb put down his fork. The noise around us dimmed. He stood up slowly, straightened his shirt, and said, "Thank you all for coming." Someone asked if he was okay, but he didn't answer. He looked at me and said, "You're done here." It wasn't loud, but everyone heard it. At first, I thought he was joking too, trying to match the tone. I laughed nervously, saying, "Don't be dramatic, it's your party." He turned to the waiter, took out his wallet, and said, "They'll be leaving now." The waiter glanced at me, unsure, but Caleb handed him his card and waited. The room fell silent except for the sound of the bill printing. I whispered, "You're embarrassing me." He said, "You did that yourself." No one moved. Finally, Nina grabbed her bag and muttered, "Wow, touchy much?" The others followed her lead. Awkward smiles plastered on their faces as they shuffled out. I stayed behind, frozen. Caleb didn't look at me again. When I finally stood up, he said, "Take your things when you go." Outside, the night air felt too sharp. My friends huddled near the parking lot, laughing nervously, already turning it into a story. "He's so uptight," Nina said. "You were joking. He needs to grow up." I nodded weakly, agreeing even though my throat burned. I told them I'd talk to him later, that he just needed time to cool off. Inside, though, I knew this wasn't like our usual arguments. When I got home, the lights were on. Boxes sat near the door, small but deliberate. My clothes, shoes, and a few books. On top of one box was a folded note. It said only, "You turned me into a punchline." I tore it up, angry. I told myself he was overreacting, that men couldn't take jokes anymore. I called Nina, ranting about how unfair he was being. She said, "You just bruised his ego. He'll come crawling back." That's what I wanted to believe. I went to bed in the guest room, telling myself he'd knock on the door before morning. But I heard him downstairs, moving around quietly. Then came the sound of a door closing. The soft, final kind of close that told me he wasn't coming up. Just before dawn, my phone buzzed, a notification from a group chat. Someone uploaded the birthday video. I woke up to 100 notifications. At first, I thought they were birthday leftovers, messages from people saying how fun the night had been. But when I opened them, my stomach dropped. The video from the restaurant was everywhere. Someone, probably Nina, had posted a clip of me laughing after that awful joke. The caption read, "When the birthday roast goes too far." I could hear my own voice in the background, teasing him, the laughter swelling around me. Caleb's face appeared in the frame for just a second, his eyes cold, distant. The comments were brutal. Some laughed, others called it painful to watch. One said, "Poor guy, she humiliated him." I deleted the post, but screenshots were already spreading. I called Nina in a panic. She answered half asleep, irritated, saying I was overreacting. "It's just a clip," she said. "People post worse things all the time." I told her Caleb would see it. She said, "Let him. Maybe then he'll learn to take a joke." But I wasn't laughing anymore. When I came downstairs, Caleb was already at the kitchen table, dressed neatly, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. My heart pounded as I asked if he'd seen it. He said, "I did." I tried to explain that it was only a moment, taken out of context. He said, "Context doesn't change humiliation." I told him he was being dramatic, that nobody really cared. He looked at me then, and I wished he hadn't. His voice was calm when he said, "You cared more about their laughter than my dignity." I told him he was twisting it. He stood, collected his mug, and simply said, "Maybe that's all we do now, twist things until they break." Then he went upstairs and closed the door. I felt cornered. My friends were texting jokes, trying to lighten the mood, but it all sounded fake now. I went outside to clear my head and noticed something strange. Caleb's car was gone. He must have left quietly through the garage. For a moment, I thought about calling him, but my pride stopped me. Instead, I posted something vague. People love to judge without knowing the full story. It got sympathy comments, and that made me feel a little better, until one reply read, "You're the one who posted the story." By noon, I got a message from Jared, my client from the design studio. He said he saw the video and joked that Caleb looked like he wanted to disappear. He followed it with, "If he can't appreciate your energy, someone else will." I should have ignored it, but I didn't. I told myself I needed a distraction, a reminder that I was still desirable, still interesting. We chatted for hours about work, about life, about how people overreact to harmless fun. I didn't notice time slipping by until Caleb walked in that evening. He looked exhausted but composed. He didn't mention the video, just asked if Liam had eaten. I said yes, though our son was spending the night at his mother's. Caleb nodded and went to the office. I followed him, trying to break the ice. "I deleted the post," I said. "It's gone now." He didn't look up from his desk. "You can't delete a wound," he said quietly. That line cut me, but I refused to show it. I told him I'd already apologized. He said, "No, you defended it." I asked if he planned to stay angry forever. He said, "I'm not angry. I'm disappointed that you think this is about anger." Then he returned to his work. On his desk, I noticed something, a small notebook with neatly written lists, bills, schedule, documents. It looked methodical, almost clinical. That night, I tried to make things normal again. I ordered dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and played music softly. When he came into the kitchen, I asked if he'd like to join me. He said, "Not tonight." I joked that he was punishing me. He said, "No, I'm teaching you silence." Then he left. I sat alone at the table, scrolling through old pictures of us. The earlier years looked simple, smiling selfies, family trips, his quiet hand always resting on my shoulder. I wondered when that warmth had turned into this distance. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe it wasn't. I told myself that he'd been pulling away long before the party, that I was only reacting to neglect. It made me feel better to believe it. Later, Nina came over uninvited, full of her usual energy. She said, "You can't let him make you feel guilty for being fun." I told her this wasn't just fun, it was everywhere online. She waved her hand dismissively. "It'll fade. Everything does." She poured herself a glass of wine and said, "You need to remind him what he's losing. Be confident. Post something better." Her words stuck with me. When she left, I took a photo in front of the mirror. Perfect lighting, bright smile, captioned, "Still standing tall." I told myself it wasn't revenge, just self-assurance. But when Caleb saw it the next morning, he didn't say a word. He just turned his phone face down on the table and walked out. That silence was worse than any argument. I followed him to the driveway, demanding to know what he was doing. He said, "You've turned everything into performance. I'm done performing." Then he got in his car and drove off. I stood there, shaking, angry, and afraid. The neighbors across the street glanced over before pretending to look away. I went back inside, slammed the door, and opened my phone again. The video was still being shared. Someone had posted it on a gossip page with the caption, "When your own wife laughs the loudest." I shut the screen off, my throat tight. Upstairs, I heard a drawer close, and then the faint sound of a zipper. He was packing something. A calendar notification appeared on his open laptop downstairs. Appointment downtown 10:15. The next morning, the house felt colder than usual. Caleb didn't come downstairs for breakfast, and I told myself he was just avoiding me, giving himself space. But when I peeked into his office, the desk was empty, the chair pushed in neatly, and the shelves looked too bare. A few of his books were missing. I panicked for a moment, thinking he might have left for good. Then I noticed the same notebook from before, still on the desk, but now there was a folded note beside it. It said, "Take care of yourself, Iris. I'll be staying with Mum for a while." I tore the note in half and threw it in the trash. He was trying to make a point, to guilt me. That's what I told myself. I texted him, "You're overreacting. We can fix this if you stop acting like a victim." He didn't reply. I sent another message. "You're embarrassing yourself now." Still no reply. I spent most of that morning pacing, checking my phone every few minutes. Nina texted that she'd heard Caleb moved out. I didn't even ask how she knew. She said, "Good. Maybe this'll shake him up. Men need a wake-up call." I almost believed her. Later, I had a meeting with Jared at a cafe near my office. I told myself it was just about work, finalizing the design project for his firm. But I dressed a little too carefully. When I arrived, he stood to greet me, smiling wide, charming as always. He said, "You look better than your reputation online." I rolled my eyes and told him people love to exaggerate. He said, "If it were me, I'd have taken that joke as a compliment." It made me laugh, partly from relief, partly because I wanted to feel seen again. We talked for hours, mostly about how everyone today was too sensitive. He said, "You can't live in fear of what people think. You're fun. Don't let him dim that." His words sank in deeper than I expected. I told him maybe Caleb couldn't handle a woman with a loud personality. Jared smirked. Then he shouldn't have married one. When I got home, Caleb's car was in the driveway. My pulse jumped. I walked in like nothing was wrong, pretending confidence I didn't feel. He was in the living room, sorting through folders, papers spread neatly on the table. He looked up, then back down again. I asked, "So you're just moving out without talking to me?" He said, "I've talked. You just don't listen." I crossed my arms. "So what, you're punishing me now?" He shook his head. "No, I'm protecting what's left of me." I scoffed. "Oh, please. One bad night doesn't erase a marriage." He replied, "It wasn't one night. It was every small laugh at my expense that you called love." That one hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I told him he was twisting my words again, that he always wanted to play the victim. He said, "You played the audience. There's a difference." Then he quietly started stacking the papers into piles. I caught a glimpse of one labeled household. Another was marked property. Something cold ran through me. I asked what those were, and he said, "Notes. I like to stay organized." I wanted to snatch them up, but I didn't dare. He looked too calm, too sure. That night, I met Nina and two other friends at a rooftop bar. I didn't tell them everything, only that Caleb was being distant again. They laughed and said I needed to post another photo, something to remind him what he'd lost. Nina said, "He wants you to beg. Don't. Make him jealous instead." I drank too much, trying to drown the ache in my chest. I told them I was tired of being blamed for having a personality. One of them joked that Caleb probably felt intimidated by strong women. I laughed, louder than I meant to. It felt good for a moment, to belong, to be the funny one again. Then someone across the bar pointed at their phone. I caught a flash of that same birthday video playing on another screen. I froze. The table went quiet. Nina reached over, turned my face toward her and said, "Ignore it. People are bored. They'll move on." I nodded, but something in me cracked. I left early, pretending I was fine, but as soon as I got home, I saw Caleb sitting in the living room again, laptop open. The soft light from the screen made his face look distant. I said, "I thought you were at your mother's." He said, "I came to get a few things." I asked if he'd seen the video again. He said, "It keeps finding me." I told him I couldn't control what people posted. He said, "You controlled what you laughed at." I snapped back, "So now I'm the villain for having fun." He closed the laptop and looked at me for a long moment. "You are the villain for forgetting I was human." I wanted to scream, to throw something, but instead I said quietly, "You're cruel when you're calm." He replied, "I learned that from you." He stood, walked past me, and went upstairs. I followed, still talking, still justifying. I told him I'd only tried to make people like him more, that I was proud of him, that I was just trying to lighten the mood. He stopped at the top of the stairs and said, "You don't lighten anything. You burn everything down and call it warmth." Then he disappeared into the bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the stairs, shaking. For the first time, I felt afraid, not of losing him, but of how easily he'd detached. He didn't raise his voice, didn't insult me, didn't fight back. He just stopped seeing me. Hours later, I heard the printer start again in his office. Slow, steady whirs, paper sliding out, one after another. When I finally looked, the printer tray held a single page. On top was a heading in bold, summary, incident record, personal use. I stared at that page for a long time, my hands trembling as I picked it up. It wasn't anything official. No letterhead, no stamps. Just Caleb's handwriting, neat and even. Dates, short phrases, like a log of our marriage gone wrong. March 12th, she joked about me at her sister's dinner. May 4, told co-workers private things. July 19th, public video. Each line was a small wound, carefully preserved. He'd been keeping track. I dropped the paper like it burned and went upstairs, furious. He was in the bedroom, folding shirts into a suitcase. I stood in the doorway and asked if he'd been planning this all along. He said, "Planning to protect myself? Yes." I laughed sharply, trying to sound in control. "You're documenting your wife now." He didn't look at me. "I'm documenting a pattern," he said. Something inside me cracked. I told him he was being paranoid, that people argue, people make mistakes. He said, "Mistakes end when you stop repeating them." I called him self-righteous. He said, "If that helps you sleep, call it what you want." He zipped the suitcase, calm as ever. When he left the room, I grabbed my phone and called Nina. I told her he was keeping records of everything I did. She laughed and said, "Let him. He'll look crazy if he ever shows it to anyone." I told her I wasn't so sure. He wasn't yelling, wasn't emotional. He was too calm, too methodical. She said, "He's bluffing. Just make him jealous again. Remind him who you are." I hung up without answering. The thought of making him jealous felt pointless now. He didn't care enough to be jealous. That evening, Evelyn, his mother, came by without warning. She looked at me the way people look at strangers. I asked if Caleb had sent her. She said no, that she came because someone had to look you in the eye. I told her she was overstepping. She said, "You humiliated my son in front of everyone he respected." I said, "It was a joke." She said, "You laughed while others judged him." That's not a joke. That's cruelty. I wanted to argue, to explain that Caleb always acted like the victim, that he made me feel invisible. But Evelyn wasn't listening. She handed me a folded towel from a box by the door, something he'd forgotten. "He'll be at my place for now," she said quietly. "If you need to reach him, call his lawyer." My heart dropped. "What lawyer?" I asked, but she didn't answer. She walked out without another word. That night I didn't sleep. The house felt hollow. Every sound, the hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, felt like accusation. I sat on the couch, scrolling through old messages between us. The early ones were full of warmth. He'd written things like, "You make every day lighter." I used to respond, "You make me feel seen." When had that stopped being true? Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Jared. "You okay? You deserve better than silence." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "He's leaving." Jared wrote back almost instantly. "Then maybe that's good. Maybe it's time you stop apologizing for being you." The next day, Liam came home from staying with Evelyn. He was quiet, holding his backpack too tightly. When I asked about his dad, he said, "He's busy." I tried to smile. He'll be back soon. He nodded but didn't look convinced. Later, while I was making dinner, he came into the kitchen and asked softly, "Mum, why were you laughing at Daddy?" My heart stopped. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Grandma showed him crying. She said you made fun of him." I dropped the spoon. I told him it was all a misunderstanding, that adults say things they don't mean. He looked at me with the same calm eyes as his father and said, "Then why didn't you say sorry in front of everyone too?" I didn't have an answer. He went back to his room quietly, leaving me standing there with tears I didn't even feel at first. That question replayed in my head all night. Why hadn't I apologized when it mattered? Why had I laughed instead of stopping it? I told myself it was pride, but maybe it was something worse, fear of being ordinary, of being the one laughed at instead of doing the laughing. When Caleb came by the next morning to pick up more of his things, I tried one last time. I said, "You can't just walk away. We have a child." He said, "That's exactly why I'm walking away. He deserves better than this." I said, "So that's it? You're just done?" He looked at me with the same steady calm that had once made me feel safe. "I was done the night you chose to laugh instead of stand beside me." I told him I was sorry, truly sorry. He nodded, almost kindly, but said nothing. He just carried a box to the car, loaded it, and closed the trunk. Then, before he left, he said, "I'll handle things properly. You'll know soon." The way he said it chilled me more than anger ever could. Properly. The word sounded heavy, final, like it already had a plan attached. He drove off, leaving the driveway empty. I stood at the window, watching the taillights disappear into the dark. Behind me, the clock ticked steady and cruel. I picked up my phone and saw a new notification, an email preview with his name. I opened it, but it was blank except for one line. "Please check your mail tomorrow." I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred. The next morning, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, a courier stood there holding a sealed envelope with my name printed neatly on the front. I didn't open the envelope right away. I just stood there, frozen, holding it like it might explode. The courier said, "Signature, please." And when I scribbled my name, my hand barely worked. The envelope was plain, thick, heavy in a way that made my chest tighten. I walked back inside, sat on the couch and just stared at it. I couldn't bring myself to tear it open. Instead, I called Caleb. Straight to voicemail, I called again. Same result. The third time, I left a message. Something half angry, half pleading. "You can't keep doing this. You can't just send things instead of talking to me." I waited for a reply that never came. I put the envelope on the counter, telling myself I'd deal with it later. But I couldn't think about anything else. Every time I walked past it, I imagined what might be inside. Maybe a letter, maybe legal papers, maybe just another quiet punishment. I poured a drink, then another. The clock ticked through the afternoon, while my phone stayed silent. By evening, Nina came over again, uninvited as always. She saw the envelope right away. "What's that?" she asked. I said, "I think it's something from him." She grinned. "Open it." I said, "No, I want to wait." She rolled her eyes. "You sound scared. What's he going to do, send a breakup in writing?" I didn't answer. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat down. "You need to stop letting him control the story," she said. "Post something tonight. Make him see you're not crumbling." I told her that hadn't worked last time. She said, "That's because you apologized in your captions. You have to act like you don't care." I looked at her, my so-called friend who had filmed that night, who had posted it, who had kept telling me to laugh. I wanted to blame her for everything, but I couldn't. I had laughed. I had chosen to join in. The guilt felt too heavy to shift onto anyone else. When she left, the house fell silent again. I picked up the envelope and ran my finger under the seal. Then I stopped. Instead of opening it, I went to Caleb's office. I hadn't been inside since he'd left. The air still smelled faintly like him. Coffee, paper, and something clean, almost sharp. The desk was empty now, except for a few labeled folders. Household savings custody. I froze. That last word hit like a slap. Custody. I sat down in his chair, trying to breathe. He couldn't be serious. We'd never fought about Liam, not once. I was a good mother. I might have hurt Caleb, yes, but never our son. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it wasn't what it sounded like. Maybe it was just him being thorough, organizing finances. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't organization, it was preparation. The next day, I took Liam to school. He hugged me goodbye, quieter than usual. At the gate, another parent smiled awkwardly and said, "I saw the video. Hope everything's okay." I forced a laugh and said, "People love drama, don't they?" But when I turned, I saw Caleb's car parked across the street. He was sitting inside, watching, not angrily, just watchful. I wanted to walk over, to say something, but my feet wouldn't move. That afternoon, I went to Evelyn's house. I told myself I was going there to make peace, to show I could be mature. She opened the door but didn't invite me in. "He doesn't want visitors," she said. I told her I wasn't a visitor, I was his wife. She said, "You were." The word hit me like cold water. I tried to explain, to apologize, to say it wasn't what it looked like. Evelyn sighed. "He told me not to argue with you. He said you'll try to turn everything into a performance." I snapped that he was manipulating her. She said, "No, Iris, he's protecting himself from you." When I got home, the house felt even emptier than before. I sat in the living room, staring at the envelope again. Finally, I tore it open, only to find nothing inside but a blank sheet of paper. My breath caught. I flipped it over, but it was clean. Just one word printed neatly in the center. Wait. I didn't understand. Wait for what? I threw it down, frustrated. Maybe it was his way of taunting me. Maybe he wanted me to sit here, drowning in anxiety. I texted him again. "I got your little message. I'm not afraid of your games." This time, he replied, "It's not a game, it's a process." That word chilled me. Process. I asked what that meant, but he didn't respond. The next few days blurred together. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The house echoed with quiet. Liam was still with Evelyn. I told myself it was temporary, that Caleb was just trying to make me feel what he'd felt, left out, unseen. I even convinced myself he'd come around once I apologized again. But when I tried calling him that night, his number went straight to voicemail. So I did what I always do when I panic. I posted a photo of an old birthday card he'd written me, captioned, "People change, but memories don't." It got hundreds of likes, and for a brief moment I felt seen again. But within an hour, Caleb's account posted something too, a picture of a calendar entry. Court date, downtown 10:15. No caption, no explanation, just that. I stared at the screen until my hand started shaking. My phone buzzed again. A message from him. "Tomorrow, you'll understand what properly means." I wanted to call, to scream, to ask what he was doing, but I didn't. I sat there, staring at that single word, properly, and realized it was the same one he'd said before, the one that had made my heart sink. He wasn't bluffing. He was preparing. As the clock hit midnight, headlights flashed across the living room window, Caleb's car pulling up outside for the first time in weeks. Then came 3 calm knocks at the door. I opened the door, expecting a fight, but Caleb stood there calmly, not angry, not cold, just finished. Behind him was a man in a suit holding a small stack of papers. Caleb said quietly, "This is being done properly, like I told you." My throat closed as the man handed me the envelope. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My name, his name, everything official, everything real. I tried to speak, to tell him we could still fix this, but he shook his head. "You turn love into an audience," he said. "Now the audience is gone." I whispered that he was overreacting, that I'd been stupid, not cruel. He said, It stopped being a mistake when you laughed twice. I stepped toward him, but he moved back, leaving the papers in my hands. I've arranged custody terms, he added softly. Liam deserves quiet. The man with him nodded, polite and silent, then left. Caleb looked at me one last time and said, "Goodbye, Iris." He turned away before I could reply. The door shut gently behind him. The sound of his car starting was distant, final. I looked down at the papers, and for once there was nothing left to say. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.